page, Florida Kids Helping Kids. For carnival ticket information, call 352-347-0883.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, if you were just listening to the last interview, it was by quite a coincidence that we had a historian on just in the last half hour, and we were talking about some of the things that led up to World War II, and gosh, that was such a coincidence because now we are going to speak to J.J. White. J.J. White is an award-winning novelist. He's a short story writer who has been published in Wordsmith, the Homestead Review, the Seven Hills Review, Bacopa Review, the Gray Sparrow Journal, and he's the recipient of awards and honors from the Alabama Writers Conclave, Writers Editors International, Maryland Writers Association. It goes on and on and on. And he's written a book called Nisei, I think I'm saying it right, and it's described as a passionate tale of life for a Japanese-American man after the Pearl Harbor attack. And we've all heard those horror stories about how the Japanese Americans were treated horribly after that attack. And you can say that we've got something similar happening right now with some of the Muslim folks in our community, people who've done no harm and are being targeted. I can remember when I was a kid in the 60s, of course, so that I didn't experience this firsthand, but I remember my mom telling me stories of how, because they were German Americans, how they were a little bit treated differently, back in the 40s, I guess that would have been. J.J. White, this is a fascinating subject. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Larry. Good morning, Robin.
Good morning.
And where are you calling from?
Merritt Island, Florida.
Oh, not too far away.
No, we're right by the Space Center.
Have you been with us before?
I have. I've written a few thrillers in the past, and I've been on your show before.
Yeah. Okay, that's why you sound familiar. So how did this topic become a topic that you wanted to incorporate into a story?
Well, I was going to write another thriller, but sometimes the topic picks you instead of you picking it. I think I'd read an article or saw a show about the Japanese Americans in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and how during World War II, this was a segregated Japanese American regiment, and how during World War II they were sent on a suicide mission to save 211 white men that were surrounded by 10,000 Germans in France, and in the process they had 1,000 casualties, saving 211 white men. I thought, wow, this sounds like a great story. So I decided to write it from the perspective of one GI.
So did you put on your historian hat and have to do a whole lot of research?
Yeah, I'm a historical fiction junkie anyway, and a history junkie. I love reading history books, so it took pretty much, even though the book is 246 pages or something like that, it took about 1,000 pages of research plus on the web just to write the book. So it's tough for Irish American to write about Japanese American without doing a lot of research.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, the book is spelled Nisei. You told me off the air that it's pronounced Nisei or Nisei. I can't remember where the accent is. What does the word mean?
It's Nisei, means second generation. It's a Japanese word, means second generation Japanese Americans. What happened during the turn of the century in the 1900s, hundreds of thousands of Japanese came over to the United States and Hawaii because they were being taxed to death over in Japan, and they became in agriculture. And they were the Issei, I-S-S-E-I. The Issei is a form of Ichi, which means one. And they were Japanese. They weren't Japanese Americans. They weren't allowed to have citizenship. So their sons and daughters were the Nisei, which means two in Japanese, ni, and they became the second generation. They were born between like 1935 and 19 1915 and 1935, and they're the second generation. And then you have the Sensei, which would be the third generation, born from the 1950s and so on. And this is a story about a particular Nisei from Hawaii who was born in 1923 and was involved in Pearl Harbor all the way up through the war.
And so, did you, in writing the story, so you took historical facts and then you wove them into a story that you created, right?
Yes, I took on the Hawaii University of Hawaii website, and I worked with Dr. Ellen Tamara of the University of Hawaii, talked to her, and they basically have the stories of the Nisei during the war, including Senator Daniel Inouye of Hawaii, and they all fought during the war, and they took their stories and put them online. And what I did was take anecdotes and bits and pieces of each story and fictionally put it into one person. Of my character's name is Hideo Bobby Takahashi.
And did it enlighten you at all as far as the plight that they went through?
Well, it did. My generation knew something about it. Generation fathers who fought in the war, they knew a lot about it, and plus they did movies and stories about it. But my generation has a little bit of knowledge, but the next generation has none. So I thought it would be interesting to write it in a fictional book and have the next generation, my kids and their kids, to understand what happened during that time, including the internment. You were talking about, as you came on, how the Muslims could possibly, if the terrorism increases, they could possibly talk about internment for Muslims. And it's the same, basically, atmosphere that it was back then. The Pearl Harbor just happened. Everyone pretty much hated the Japanese at that time. And when Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, essentially imprisoning all the Japanese Americans, everyone kind of went along with it because, you know, we had just been attacked.
Yeah, and looking back on it, our hindsight shows that is totally unreasonable, but yet nobody seemed to think it at the time. And the one thing I hope that telling the story the way you've done, I'm hoping it opens our eyes so that we don't do that. We are better than that.
Well, we are, and the problem back then was it happened so suddenly. It was very much like the 9/11 attacks. Everyone had this instant hate, instant rage. And so when they interned the Japanese Americans, you know, people think they did it because they were just Japanese American, but there were many Japanese loyalists, and there were spies and there were saboteurs, but they were very small. But in order to, really didn't have the time to investigate 400,000 Japanese Americans. So someone came up with the idea, if we imprison them during the war, then we don't have to worry about them. And they didn't even consider that they were going to be arrested. You can imagine being, answering the door at your house, and there's military police out there, and they've come to arrest you, and they've already arrested your husband, and they went down to the elementary school and arrested your kids. And whatever you can carry, you've got one day, and then you're out of there, and you're in a prison. So you can imagine what that felt like. So, but during the times, you have to live there, I think, to understand what was going on.
And you also have a love story interwoven in there, a love interest.
It is. All my books seem to turn into love stories. But what happened there was in the 1930s, he's on Hawaii, and the Hawaii Nisei talk in a pidgin language, but basically he fell in love with a white girl, and she fell in love with him. And back in the 1930s, falling in love with a white girl as Japanese American is the same as a black man falling in love with a white girl back then. It was taboo and not allowed. So they had to keep it secret, and he went on to imprisonment and then to enlist in the service and fight overseas in Europe and France and come back, but he could not come back to this white girl because she was white. So they had this secret romance going on their whole life.
Yeah.
And how did his fellow soldiers accept him fighting by his side?
Well, that's the problem. He was in a segregated unit. The 442nd Regimental Combat Troop was made up of 4,000 Japanese American soldiers with white officers. So all his Japanese American soldiers frowned upon it, just like the white men would frown upon it. You just didn't do that. You had to marry or intermarry in your own race.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, we have come a long way, I hope. I don't know. You are... Let's see. You're in Florida. Do I see somewhere you were in Alabama at one point, or no? Am I remembering wrong?
No, I won some awards in Alabama.
Oh, okay,
I actually grew up in Vermont until about 10 years old, and then moved down here. So I'm basically a Floridian now. I even have the golf tan and everything.
Right. Let me take a little break. We'll be right back. J.J. White is our guest. You said you're on Merritt Island right now?
Yes.
The book is called Nisei. It's a passionate tale of life for a Japanese-American man after the Pearl Harbor attack. We'll be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. On this Wednesday, intervals of clouds and sunshine. There can be a shower in spots before the day is through, high 75 to 79. Wednesday night, partly cloudy skies, lows in the 50s, inland 62 along the coast. Thursday, mostly sunny, highs in the mid to upper 70s. For Friday, mostly sunny, the high 76 to 80. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Hi, this is JP from Penn Flooring here in Ocala. I would like to invite you to come in and visit our spacious showroom where we have solutions for every style and budget. From wall-to-wall carpet to hardwood floors and tiles, we have an unsurpassed selection of flooring. At Penn Flooring, we've provided quality customer service with a family touch for over 25 years. Visit our website at pennflooring.com or come by our showroom, 1201 Southwest 17th Street, just over the bridge. Penn Flooring, quality customer service with a family touch.
That was the sound of a tree falling. It could be your tree. You're going to have it trimmed, but never got around to calling Pride Tree Service. It could have fallen in a field, and now all you have to do is call Pride Tree Service, and they'll have it quickly out of the way for a great price. But don't wait until the tree falls. It may not fall in the field. It may hit your car, your house, or worse. So call Pride Tree Service today and avoid all those headaches before they happen. Pride Tree Service, 572-2510. That's 572-2510.
Here's what you may have missed on the John Tesh Radio Show.
Beethoven was extremely particular about his coffee. He insisted each cup be made with exactly 60 beans. There's a new smart pepper spray. It's called the Defender, and it not only shoots a disabling spray at an attacker, it takes a picture of them in the process. So moms-to-be and friends of moms-to-be, if you want your cheese fix, experts say stick with pasteurized cheese only.
Intelligence for your life on the John Tesh Radio Show. Don't miss this stuff.
Career Source Citrus Levy Marion brings together business and community partners, economic development leaders, and educational providers to connect employers with qualified, skilled talent and job seekers with employment and career development opportunities. Tune in the first and third Wednesday of each month at 9:30 a.m. to Career Source Citrus Levy Marion and learn how they can help you.
All right, 12 minutes before 10 o'clock, and J.J. White is on the phone. He's the author of another book. He's been on with us before with some other books. This one is called Nisei, and it's kind of a different one for him. In the past, he's written some thriller novels. This is historical in nature, and in that it talks about a Japanese-American man after the Pearl Harbor attack. He was in a, what do you call it, Japanese internment camp. Yeah, thank you. In California. And while it's fictional, it's based on factual things. I wanted to tell you something, JJ, that I was thinking of during the break. Years ago, I remember I was reading a book in the middle of July in my office at a different radio station, and the storyline took place in the middle of winter. So it was July in the real world, but in my mind, I was in the middle of a winter snowstorm, okay? And then I had to go someplace, so I closed the book and went out the door, and it was so hot, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I was thinking it was going to be cold out here because I was so into the story. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because in your book, the story is told by the grandson, right? Is it by the grandson?
Yes, he finds the memoir in the year 2000 in a house that they were selling in Pearl City, Oahu.
Okay, so let me make the connection to my snow story. So in the real world, I'm wondering if like a real grandson or great-grandson read such a story and realized how unfairly his grandfather had been treated, he closes the book, he walks out into the real world. Does he harbor resentment toward the white people he sees? Do you know what I'm saying? Because that's history. We're not doing it now. And I'm wondering if maybe that's not what's happening now, is some people are reliving some of the atrocities that were committed upon people by other people. And it's not happening now, but we're pretending it or we feel like it did because we're just, maybe we're just learning about it. And do you see where I'm going with the question?
Yeah, the Japanese Americans, I don't want to generalize, but they're reticent, and they were very prideful during the war. There was very little rebellion against it. What they thought was, when they were interned, they said, all right, you know what? We're going to go along with this, and we're going to show that we're loyal Americans. And so it was very important to them that they show that, they already were loyal Americans, but they wanted to show that they were loyal Americans. And they even gave up their property. The property was given away to other people after they were interned. Now, his son, Robert Takahashi, is 45 years later after the death of his father, and he's reading this memoir upstairs, and he's got his own problems and his own demons, and basically this is a catharsis to him. He's reading this, finding out for the first time his father was a hero, finding out that he won the Distinguished Service Cross and wasn't able to get the Medal of Honor because they didn't give the Medal of Honor to Japanese Americans or Black Americans at that time. They only gave them to white Americans. So this is all a catharsis to him, and it's coming back, and he's and at one point in the book his father says, I hope that you never shame the Takahashi name. And of course this son has done that, and so to him it's a personal thing, and he has I don't have in there that he shows any resentment to the government for interning his parents or anything, because he didn't know about it. This is the first time he heard about it. But I'm sure if it happened in real life that you would have a little bit of resentment, obviously, saying this was unfair and there should be reparations and for that.
Yeah. Wow. What? This is like a very. This is deep. Do you find this deeper than normal for yourself as a writer, or not necessarily?
Well, as a writer, you always try to get emotions out of the reader. It doesn't matter what the emotion is. In my thrillers, there was always trying to either get humor or some type of anger or something like that. But in this one, basically, there are points where you actually do cry in certain points of it, and I got deep into it, and I got so deep into it that it was like an actor doing method acting.
Yeah.
I started talking in the Pidgin language, which is a combination of Portuguese, Japanese, English that the Hawaiians use, and I started talking that way, and after a while my wife would be asking what I want for dinner. I'd be talking in a Pidgin language. She'd say, "Can you stop doing that?" And I said,
"Oh no."
I'd say, "Doing what?" But basically, when you're a writer, you have to have a stage in front of you while you're writing, and up on that stage, your characters talk and everything. So you get deep into the story. And yes, this one is very, very deep, and it was actually very personal.
When Japanese Americans were captured during World War II by the Japanese, were they treated more horrendously than if white Americans were captured?
The Japanese I'll tell you this quick story on that. The Japanese Americans weren't allowed to fight in the Pacific Theater, and the reasoning was that they looked too much like the enemy, and that they would be shot accidentally. So they were only allowed in the European theater. But the argument that the Nisei gave, the Nisei soldiers gave, they say, well, listen, he says, all you white soldiers look like the Germans. Why do you send them over there? So that was their argument, which was a valid argument.
Yeah.
They would not have been shot accidentally. But no, they didn't fight in the Pacific Theater. There was one small battalion that did translation over in the Pacific Theater, but none of them were ever. They never were captured, thank goodness.
Oh, okay.
Do you know, I mentioned...
And I'm sure I'm sure they would have been treated worse.
I mentioned that I have German heritage. My uncle was actually born in Germany, and of course they moved here, I think in 1928 or something like that, and he would have been 6 years old. So when when World War II started, he joined the Navy, and because he had that German heritage, they did not put him in the European theater; they put him in the Pacific.
Oh,
yeah.
That's interesting.
Right. Well, the same thing. Most of the prejudice for the Germans, there was a lot in World War II, but not as much as in World War I. In World War I, the Germans in the United States were treated horribly because of the war in Europe.
So does this change anything about yourself as a writer? Do you now go in a different direction? Does this mark a beginning of a new era for you?
Well, it might. I got a couple of manuscripts in with my agent. One of them's a police procedure, but the other one is a historical fiction. So this time about the Berlin airlift and I like talking about World War II. It has to be at least 50 years old to be historical fiction anyway. If it's not 50 years old, you can't call it historical fiction. Oh. So I'm talking about the Berlin airlift, and yeah, I've already been hooked on that, and I'm over there now and waiting to see if she can peddle it to another publisher. So we'll see how that works out.
Does the story encompass what happened to the white girl?
Yes, it does, and it revolves around her, and there's a very surprise ending that I've had people get very upset at, but it's a surprise ending with the white girl, and it involves the son that's reading the memoir. So I won't give too much away.
No. Well, gosh, we're all fascinated. J.J. White, the book is called Nisei, Nisei. Let's see, website. Do you have a website so we can get the book?
It's www.jjwhitebooks.com, and you can take the links there, or you can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all the other places, and Black Opal Books is the publisher. I've also got it in some bookstores in California, Hawaii, and local bookstores at Barnes & Noble. So
I'd be curious, have you had any feedback from any Japanese Americans?
I have. I give presentations about the book to libraries, and I'm thinking of going to Sacramento to give one to the there, which has a high Japanese American contingency and or contingent. And yes, they've one couple. His mother was a Nisei, and his wife's father was a Nisei, and they both were interned. Because they were on the West Coast. The Hawaiians weren't interned that much because they were on an island, but on the West Coast. And he talked about it, and he said, "You got 95% of it right." So,
that's good.
I felt good about that.
Have you been to Pearl Harbor?
I have several times. Yeah. I love going to Hawaii and Pearl Harbor.
And when you said that the Japanese Americans, when they were rounded up, could only take what they could carry, does that mean other people moved into their homes then?
Yes, and in California mostly, those that owned farms were given. Their farms were given to other farmers.
Wow!
While they were gone.
Wow! I think you're on a new trail in your writing career. I think it's going to be a good one for you. Real quickly, do you immerse yourself in it? Do you like play music from the 30s or the 40s or whatever era you're working on? Do you immerse yourself? You said you did with the language.
Mm-hmm.
I did with the language and the research. As you're reading along, especially during the battle scenes in Italy and France, I actually had documents that the soldiers kept, and so I was going through those documents.
Oh, wow.
And you essentially have to become part of the book. But yes, I did pretty much immerse myself in that. I didn't go around wearing a zoot suit or dance to Charleston or anything like that.
My gosh, that almost sounds therapeutic in a way. JJ, thank you so much for being on the air. If you're ever in Ocala, we would love to talk to you in the studio. Go to jjwhitebooks.com, go to Amazon. It sounds like a really good one. Nisei, Nisei. We will be right back.
Sing from the Paddock Mall Studios. This is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. Donald Trump getting calls from Hillary Clinton and